It's the All-Star break. It's time for one more mailbag this season with the trade deadline in the rearview mirror. What's the latest on Myles Turner and the Pacers spending next season? Where is their ceiling now compared to the start of the season? And questions about me, all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy All-Star break and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today I am still out on my honeymoon. I have no idea what day I'm going to release this episode, but we're doing a mailbag. I actually asked for these questions last week, so if any of them seem atypical, that is why. But I had to figure out what you guys wanted to hear while I was gone. So I took the request, and you guys were kind enough to send me some questions. Lots of Myles Turner stuff today, obviously, because he survived the trade deadline. As expected, we'll look at his future in the summer, some questions about me, the team ceiling, all sorts of other changes. Thank you guys for bearing with me this week on these pre-scheduled episodes. I'll be back either Friday or Monday, back talking about the team. And we're just going to dive right in. As you guys know, one, I don't prep for these. I try to read the questions so you can hear my thought process. And two, specifically today, there are a lot of very unthemed questions. And I'm sorry for doing so many mailbags this season, but they've had so many weird gaps in their schedule between this and Paris and the NBA Cup that we're doing three. All right, let's get going. That's too much intro. Herbie at Herbie Campbell 3 says, are the recent slow starts due to the Paris trips, or is there something else happening? Love the podcast. Thanks for everything, Tony. Thank you, Herbie. I appreciate that. Yeah, I did wonder that. I think that was an interesting part of this discussion when we talked to Myles Turner, right? When they were in Paris, he did a Zoom with us. He was very kind to do that. And I asked him that. I said, how's your body clock feel right now? And he said he was tired. And I know that was when they were in Paris, which was by the time this comes out nearly a month ago, right? But it takes a while for the adjustment to truly happen. Like the first couple days, you're somewhere that off time-wise. You're just kind of through shock of body clock, and it works out, right? But I remember reading a story. I read it because it was before the Pacers went to India for preseason a few years ago, about the Warriors and their preseason trip to China. And Draymond Green talking about jet lag and how it's messing with them, like into the regular season, right? Like it can be a weeks long thing. So I don't think it's crazy that they could have come back from Paris, like a couple days where it's just like shock, new schedule. And then after that, it hit them. And right when it starts to hit them is when they started to play bad, when they played the Hawks. And then as they're adjusting to Eastern time, they go all the way out to the West Coast for a week, right? Like they haven't had a normal same time zone schedule. In fact, they've gone on basically opposite extremes twice in the last month. Now, what I will say is they're athletes. They have the most possible research and resources available to get through these things as fast as possible in terms of timing of flights and all that. They had the back-to-back Utah, Portland in there. They had the Washington travel back-to-back in there. Like it was pretty demanding of them, but I will give that I suppose, without having asked anyone since they got back, I would give that a little bit of this is affecting them. But I think it's mostly just they're playing not very well. And my evidence for that would be like, and maybe they're not playing well because of that, but they're just not making anything, right? Their three-point shooting's been dreadful. Their defensive angles and rotations have been poor, which is a communication thing. And like, even if you're tired, you can talk and you can, at least give an effort to be in the right spot, which isn't even happening sometimes. And the other reason I would say maybe it isn't a body clock thing is they've turned it on in these games they're playing bad. Like they have moments where all of a sudden they look alert and awake and they play better. So I guess a little bit I could give, Paris might have messed them up and they talked about it and how the schedule is unique because of it. But I just think they're mostly not playing very well this month, but they found ways to turn it on just enough to actually get enough wins to sneak by. But I will be curious post All-Star break if they look a lot better, like coming right out of the break, if they look good against Memphis and Denver and all these teams, then I think it'd be pretty easy to go, oh, yeah, never mind. They're fully recovered and had a nice refreshing break and they're good to go. So I think we'll actually learn the answer to this question more by their play after having, a week with no games. Brock Philbrun at the Boss 1196. I said his name wrong the last time he asked the question. Hello, Brock. Says, is a consolidation move coming in the offseason? And if so, what would you like to see? Also, what are our backup plans if we can't keep Turner? They do have to consolidate at some point, both because they have too many guys, right? This has been long discussed on this podcast. My camera's always a little shaky because I always bump my desk when I'm talking, but someone's running on a treadmill in the other room right now, so it's very shaky right now. I apologize. The reason for that being their finances basically mandate that they'll be very expensive without trading away 2 salaries for one at some point in the next 12 months or so. And the other part of it is they have, Jarris Walker's not playing, right? Like they have too many guys for the minutes available, and that doesn't even account for and if Johnny Furphy ever ascends at some point, like they'd have another guy in the mix or whatever happens with they have their 2025 first round pick. Like that guy's never going to play. So they can't keep going this way for forever. In fact, they're probably out of rope on the juggling act that they've been doing. So I do think eventually it probably should be in the summer, but maybe I guess it could be next trade deadline, the consolidation trade. What opens up in the summer is one, they'll know Turner's finances with full clarity. 2, TJ McConnell will be tradable. 3, other extensions kick in at certain salaries, and they'll know their results of this season with hopefully a healthy Mathurin for the playoffs to have about as much information as possible of their current core and its sustainability and its ceiling in the postseason setting and how the rest of this season went and the true level of a lot of their players. And so I think a consolidation move is coming based on whatever they find out from that. What would I like to see? I mean, it's hard to say without knowing what the cost would be, right? Because what I like generically, it would be 2 players and maybe a draft pick for a really good wing or a really good movement shooter. Or if that could be the same player, even better. If it was the same player, though, that's a very expensive, hard to get player. I always talk about what the Pacers are external is whose salary does not match their role or whose upcoming salary does not match their role. For example, like Ben Simmons was making $40 million to be a bench player with the Nets. That's a terrible contract. Players who get paid a lot and don't play very much or don't play very well, that stands out. So next year, like if Obi Toppin's playing 15 minutes a game and is making $14 million to be the backup 4, that is probably the closest example. And that's not wrong. I think he's properly paid on the Pacers, but like that would make sense. If Andrew Nembhard gets more backup point guard minutes next year and McConnell's making over $10 million, is that one of them? Is it whoever starts at the 3, their salary's good, but whoever's coming off the bench, theirs isn't? There's lots of candidates in theory for someone that would be in it, but one of the players who's in the most outsized role versus salary would probably have to be in the trade. I would add that also one of the recent lottery picks would probably have to be in the trade, just because if you're consolidating and not getting better, what's the point, right? If you're trading 2 players for one that's not any better than either of the 2 players, you're just consolidating to consolidate. That doesn't actually help you with your assets. You can't split the salaries up ever again. I talked about that with Cam Johnson. If they had traded Toppin and Nesmith for Cam Johnson, their tax concerns would be even more challenging. As it stands now, they could have dumped one of those 2 guys. If they had Cam Johnson, they can't dump half of Cam Johnson, right? So the consolidation trade has to be for a better player or one that is worth paying the money that you're consolidating for, which is why it's so hard to just say they should do this. Like the right person has to be available and the right price has to be there. The other thing that happens is after this summer, they'll know all the picks they'll be able to trade going forward. Like if they can somehow trade their 2025 first for 2026 first, they should be all over that. That's obviously easier said than done. So I think they'll know the answer about when it's coming and specifically what it could look like on, say, July 6th or something of this year. But what I like to see is them try to get either a lights out movement shooter or a just fantastic wing defender. And what are the backup plans if they can't keep Turner? Pray, beg. It's hard to say. I mean, the center free agents in 2025 is Turner and then somewhat significant drop to the next best player. I guess Brook Lopez is pretty good. He's much older than Myles Turner. I mean, it's going to be tricky to see how they would go about that. Maybe so. The market, to be clear, I had to look it up, but I was going off my head. Myles, obviously, a 37-year-old Brook Lopez, a 31-year-old Clint Capella. Naz Reid has a player option. I don't know what he'll do given his role there. And then you get to like Steven Adams, Mo Wagner, who's hurt, Al Horford. There's not any really sensational players. Santi Aldama's pretty good. He's more of a 4. Daron Sharp's pretty good, but he's still kind of ascending. Like there will be decent players, but in the actual clear-cut right now starters group, the answer is player option, Naz Reid, Turner, maybe Clint Capella, and an older Brook Lopez. So the hope would be if you lose Turner as the Pacers that you could get one of those guys I just said using your mid-level exception. But Naz Reid's player option is worth more than the mid-level exception. So if that's all he was getting, he would just opt in. I don't think Clint Capella is worth it and isn't as good as Turner. Brook Lopez would be like the prayer safety net in that case, but I think they would try to sign and trade him for a different center or try to do the consolidation trade that you asked about to get that player, because they'd be in a lot of trouble if that's what happened. Plenty more questions to get to today. Those were two good starts, and there will be much more Myles Turner coming today. We'll get to that coming up right here on Locked On Pacers. Everybody, short little break here so we can talk about FanDuel when the game tips off. The NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. They have so many fun things like their live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're looking to back your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, never feel like you missed your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day on this mailbag. Make Locked On NBA your second listen to hear about the latest and greatest around the association on this All-Star break. Continuing a Pacers mailbag, AJ Reese at the AJ Reese says, who is your pick for the next IU basketball coach? This is a four-parter. The first one's not about the Pacers. I don't know. I mean, I would love Brad. We went to the same high school, so I have the affinity for Brad. I don't think he'll ever do it. None of the other candidates seem reasonable or it's super inspiring to me that I've read about. I kind of like the idea of Mick Cronin. He seems like he wins wherever he goes, but I don't know. I really just want some sharp offensive guy. Like, even if their defense stinks, at least make it be fun, stink, and not what it is now. I'm not well-versed in college coaches to truly know the answer, but those are some names I kind of like. What Pacers assistant coach is most likely to get a head coaching job in the NBA other than Pierce? Which, good catch, because that would have been my answer. Lloyd Pierce, who's been a head coach before, who's been the Pacers lead assistant. Like, you hear Rick Carlisle talk all the time about when they go pitch free agents or when they go visit guys in whatever city they're in the summer. Like, Lloyd is there a lot, right? Like, he is very well connected in the league and is a great coach. General Pargo, I wrote a story about him in the summer, wants to be a head coach and certainly has the ear of players. He's fun to be around. He relates well to them because he can still play very well. He's still in his 30s. I think he's on that kind of track. Mike Weiner, Jenny Busick, well regarded for their coaching abilities. I hope I'm not forgetting one. They have a good staff. I mean, Jim Boylan was a head coach. He's on their staff as well. They have a lot of people who could do it if they either wanted to or got into that cycle. But I mean, if you read about all the assistants in the league that like are next up to be head coaches, like there's always a will and want part of it as well. And I don't know. I haven't asked all these guys. I asked JP for a story at Summer League, but I haven't asked all these guys or gals about what their dreams in coaching are. You know, Jenny Busick was a head coach before too. Like, they've all done that kind of level. So they're all talented. There's a reason that Rick really wanted to keep them from Dallas to Indiana and wanted their contracts extended when his got extended. Like, he really likes them. 3, which Pacers player would be the best at Rocket League? How's Rocket League coming up twice today? I don't know. I know who plays video games on the team, I think. That's a good question. Most NBA players are like shooter game kind of players or 2K players or sports game players in general, I guess. I don't know. My gut instinct would be like Isaiah Jackson would be both Jacksons. Quentin Jackson and Isaiah Jackson could be good. Who's good dexterity? Tyrese has good dexterity. He could be good. 4, I get 10 shots at an NBA three-pointer. How many do I make? Wide open, 3, 4, maybe. In an actual game with a defender running at me, or I'm tired, so I rush the shot, 1 at most. I miss pickup threes that are wide open when I'm tired. I think that's an underrated thing, by the way. I have a new pickup crew I've been playing with recently that are all better than me, which is good for me. That I'm the worst. I set a lot of screens, regardless of my own abilities. You know, if you take a 3 gas, like you rush your form or you're like not as precise in your technique and you miss, that's an underrated part of being in good shape in the NBA is how much it helps your shooting and your efficiency. Like, if a guy is recovering from injury, it's not stunning to me that they would shoot bad for a little bit as they come back because of conditioning, not necessarily because of the way their body part is healing. Kyle Taylor, the new GOAT of Pacers Twitter for me, at 1 Kyle Taylor says, based on the season so far, what is your updated view of the team's ceiling and floor? Are there any reasonably likely non-injury developments that would most change your mind in either direction? And one hot take for the second air quotes half of the season. I don't know that I have a change of updated ceiling because they have the same thing as last year, like their record against above 5. I don't know if this is the case post Wizards game, but I believe I think the Knicks and Wizards might have ruined this. As recently as early this week, their record against above 500 teams was better than their record against sub 500 teams. Like they always get up for those big games every time. And on one hand, that's very frustrating. You never know what the product is going to be on the floor. On the other hand, in the playoffs, you only play above 500 teams, right? So like that they are capable of winning series, plural, against good teams. Would I pick them against any of the top 3 in the East right now? Probably not. But they've been, as good as some of them since they were 10-15. The problem is you can't just ignore that they were 10-15. And I get that they were hurt and guys weren't playing awful and their defense was atrocious and now it's much better. But I mean, that you can't just ignore that, part of their season still. So I think what my adjustment would be is I think right now for this season, maybe I have their ceiling a little lower than I had before the season, as in I think they could make the conference finals again, but I'm not sure that I'd, obviously no one would favor it. That's tough to do. But like the thought process for this season coming in and why running it back made sense to me and why I talked about it so much in the summer was the thought for this team is they have so many younger or lesser experienced players that just a few of them being better would make the team better. And I guess that's happened, right? Nembhard's defense is better. Ben Mathurin is much better this year for certain, but they haven't been as good because other guys have been less consistent, or a veteran like McConnell took a step back, for example. So I think I'm a little lower on their ceiling than I was before the season started. For this core, like long term, yeah, it probably depends on how this postseason goes or next season really goes. But their floor I probably view as a little lower, just because of the consistency issues that they have. Like the fact that they can't clean those up in year 2, I don't know. But I also, when I first read this question, I was like, maybe I think of their floor as higher because they found a new defensive gear, and yet they're still kind of all over the place. And this question is funny timing to be asked right now because I bet if you asked me on February 1st, I would say, oh, they're both higher. Look at that. They were the best team in the league, or them and OKC in January. And now I don't really think that way because of this 4-3 stretch where they just look really ghastly and has somehow scraped out wins. So in terms of this specific season, I don't know that I fluctuated too much, but I do think this has made clear that maybe they certainly mostly people thought they needed another very good player to be a finals contender. I think that's basically cemented that the ceiling of this group is not quite enough to be considered finals contender. They definitely need another piece because I guess Mathurin could get there, but if he does, it would require other guys to be moved for this team to get as high. But their floor will always be 8 or higher in the East. I mean, even when they were playing truly awful and they were 10-15, they were ninth? And I know that the East isn't good, and that's a part of that calculus, but they were always even at their absolute worst this year, they were in the play-in mix. And whatever 10-15 is that 40%. No, that's not 40% win percentage. What am I saying? Yeah, it is. But that's 40% of your wins. That would still be 10th, I believe, right now. Like the Bulls suck. So, I think that their floor is maybe a little lower, but that was like everything went wrong for the first month and a half. And their ceiling's about the same. Long term, though, I think I have their ceiling a little lower than I thought before the year, and their floor actually a little higher because they're able to recover and find some defense. Any reasonably non-injury likely developments that would change my mind in either direction? Yeah, consistency specifically from Ben Mathurin, I think would make me think their ceiling could be much higher because that's like on the roster, the most high ceiling player they have that could really shake things up. Jarris Walker, similar, especially defensive growth from Jarris. Like he has the potential to be that defensive wing, and he's been a better offensive player, I think, than defensive player since being picked. And in opposite direction, I mean, not really. What would make me think less of their ceiling or floor that is somewhat plausible or likely? That's a great question. I can't say there's any, just because they're so young, right? Like if they had a lot of older players, like if I could, I guess if like Siakam shows up next season and shows some obvious signs of aging, obviously, but he was an all-star in year 1 of his max deal, right? Like that is at least gives them at least 1 or 2 more years of that deal looking fine. So it's all about young players, right? Like you just never know when growth's going to happen. Victor Oladipo popped in year 5 for the Pacers. Like it just happens for different guys at different times. So anyone can go all over the roller coaster, and some guys never figure it out, or they peak earlier. One hot take for the second half of the season. That is another good one. I'm trying to think if somebody, I think Jarris Walker's going to have his day. I don't know who's going to get hurt to make it happen, but I think Jarris is going to start playing well enough that they have to think about harder conversations with his minutes, because he was just finding that consistency before they got healthy and he had to go to the bench. And I still think that was the right choice. I've said that, and I said it before the recovery happened. I stand by that take, but he's still playing well now when he gets his chances, and I think something's going to go his way down the stretch of the season that will force them to have some even more difficult conversations in the summer. Daniel Esri at Desri99 says, what is the long-term solution for center position with Turner being free agent and the Pacers not paying the tax? Well, the answer could still be Turner, even if they don't pay the tax, would be my answer to that. But the question would then be, who is not on the team to make that happen, right? And go back to that list I said earlier of consolidation trade guys, but maybe that's Toppin, maybe it's Nesmith, maybe it's McConnell, maybe it's the young guy they have to pay in the future years like Mathurin or Jackson or whoever. There's lots of answers you could get to shed money, getting off of their own first round pick somehow and believing in there's lots of different ways to do it. But if the answer is we're not willing to pay the tax and we're not willing to pay Turner, that means they're getting a much worse center. So go back to what I said earlier about your Brook Lopez group or whatever. And maybe that would be trading their first and the players I just said for a different center who makes about that salary range or whatever they could be willing to afford. But it all depends on what Turner's first year salary is. And I think that's coming up in a future question. But they can certainly keep him and avoid the tax. The problem is they just probably then have to ship someone else off for none or little money coming back. And that is not easy to do. It's easier in the summer than it is during the season. There's bigger roster sizes. There's trade matching rules are just more plausible before aprons hit and all that, but it's not easy still. And so that would be my answer to that question. Two more coming here on Locked On Pacers, including a couple about me and a couple about Myles Turner and a couple about the future of the Pacers finances. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Locked On NBA for your second listen to get the latest and greatest from around the association. Zachary Barnett at ZLF Barnett says, what does a reasonable Mathurin extension look like? If it meant losing Nesmith and Toppin, would you extend him? That'd be tough. I mean, it depends what he looks like the rest of the season. The last two games have certainly been great. I don't know is the answer. And I say that because I don't know what Mathurin they're paying, right? Like the comp I've used is Jalen Green a few times. And he got, I think, 3 for $100 in the summer just now. That would be tough. I mean, the Pacers could not afford their team if he gets $30 million a year, but it's hard to think of like the perfect player comp for what Ben Mathurin is or what he even could be if he grows. Desmond Bane got $200 million. He's making 34 this year on his long deal. Like, could he be Jordan Poole money, which he's got a little under 100 mil guaranteed over his next 3 years? Like, yeah, I think Pacers fans would say he could be as good as Poole on his next contract. Could he get to like the Wiggins range where it's like a little over 25 million a year? Anthony Simons is in that range. Terry Rozier is in that range. That feels closer. So something between like 25 and 30 sounds right. But the guy he is, in theory, the blend of what they want Mathurin to be and what he is probably worth 25 million plus. The guy he is at times that stops the ball too much. Not too much. That's a stretch. He's gotten much better at this. That stops the ball sometimes and, breaks up the rhythm of their offense and has his defense comes and goes. And to be clear, I think that about a lot of players on the Pacers is not worth 25 million to them. And the guy that he's been since coming off the bench is worth well over 25 million to them. Right. And I think he should be their starter. I've said that. I still stand by that. So if he is the blended guy who should start, like I think that is certainly closer to the 25 to $30 million guy. And so would you give up Nesmith and Toppin, who combined to start next year making 25 million, and then the year Mathurin's new deal would start, combined will make 26 million? That's tough. That is a consolidation trade in theory. I think if Mathurin ends up being worth that much, then they probably should be willing to do that, right? Because that's the early projection. You're paying a guy on a rookie skill extension what you think he's going to be, not what he is, like his future production. And I think that's where I land with Mathurin. Right now, if he shows consistency the rest of the season, though, oh, man, he could be in line for even more than that. Then the second part of this question is, other than Rocket League, what game is the Tony East special? It's a funny question. Believe it or not, the first way I ever made money in my life was uploading Guitar Hero videos to YouTube. I was top 50-ish player at my best. I was pretty good at it until like 2018, and then everybody got way better and I quit. So that is definitely the answer. I will probably never, ever, ever play again. Never. It's very fun though. I like rhythm games in general. If you know what OSU is, anybody, big OSU guy, all that kind of stuff. And he says, still waiting on a Rocket League stream. If anybody would actually tune in to me playing Rocket League and talking about basketball, I would do it. I don't think anybody actually wants that. I have plenty of ideas for live shows that are more based on not Pacers stuff. Rooster via DM, because I deleted the tweet asking for questions right when he was about to reply. He says the first part of his question, in my estimations, what are the chances of Herb going into the tax this offseason to sign Myles to a long-term deal? I mean, it depends, right? I've talked about this with Nate Duncan, but next year, the penalties, for lack of a better term, the actual tax-paying money you pay, if you're barely over the tax, actually goes down. It's a quirk in the new CBA. However, you still don't get the redistribution from tax-paying teams. So when you cross the tax, you're losing $10 million, plus you're paying the tax on money over a certain amount. So it's at least $10 million. That's just a guess. Maybe the Suns and Celtics get a lot cheaper next year, and the Wolves and all that. But in general, it's probably worth 10 to 15 million, even if you're barely over the tax to be under, right? So depends how good they are, right? If they aren't good enough this year to be worth it, then very low chance. If they end up making the conference finals again, maybe so. And then Rooster says, what would you be willing to sign Myles to? If it were up to me personally, I'd try to get him for 5 for 100 and offer him a no trade clause, knowing they have to go higher average annual value. Yeah, I would not offer a no trade clause. I get that would keep the annual value down, which is very helpful to the Pacers and potentially keeping their team together and finding solutions for their salary situation later. But what if that solution would involve trading Turner and you just can't because you gave him that? I mean, there are worse players and probably worse in a vacuum contract than Bradley Beal, but his is the worst in the league because he can just decide, no, you're not trading me. And if he's not good and you can't trade him, you're screwed. I like Myles Turner. If that was the only way to make their offseason make sense, I guess I would do it. But I don't think that they should offer him a no trade. I've said the whole time, somewhere between 3 for 80 and 3 for 90. Maybe it'll end up a little higher than that, I guess. I mean, this week people have been asking me, like, look at this. Is Myles Turner pointing to this stretch without him saying, see, look what I'm worth, right? So, yeah, somewhere around that range would be what I would be looking at. Line up that deal with Siakam, figure things out from there. That's extendable. You know, that's about what I would think. The second part says, do I think Ben Shepherd with Pascal, Myles, Nembhard, and Tyrese starting 5 would be better than with Mathurin and Ernie Smith as the 5th starter and then Mathurin as the 6th man? Maybe so. I mean, they like to turn to Shepherd as that starter. They did when Haliburton got hurt last season. They have it a lot of other turns. And he is like, you know, I've talked about this with Mathurin. Like, part of the advantage of him, for him specifically coming off the bench, is he gets the ball a lot more. He gets more reps. That unit needs him like that. With McConnell struggling, you know, if you put Ben Shepherd in the starting 5, like, he goes minutes without touching the ball sometimes, right? And when he does, he's just chucking a corner 3, which is fine. So in theory, that could be a way to have Nembhard, Haliburton, Siakam, Turner have the most touches possible while still having a shooting and defensive weapon out there. And then your bench of McConnell, Mathurin, Nesmith, that does make good sense to me. If everybody gets in the right roles, you could still mix and match a little bit. But, you know, if the goal is to maximize that starting 5, I'm not sure Shepherd does that better than Nesmith, even though I do totally get the theory of what you're saying. And there's a reason that a lot of times when things are getting rocky for the Pacers or they need to figure out a solution to a certain problem they have in a game, they slam the Ben Shepherd button and put him out there, because when you don't make a lot of mistakes and you hustle on defense and you make threes, you have a lot of value on an NBA floor. Rooster concludes with, now the odd question. Do you see yourself being the Locked On Pacers guru for the long term? Yes, I love doing this. But he also says, or would a good offer get you up out of here? Because we sure need you and the rest of these excellent Pacers media members we are lucky to have. We do have a great media crew. Caitlin's great. Dustin's great. Scott's great. Alex, Derek, Tom. They have a great team on the announcing crew. Excellent media group. That on top of that, though, I mean, I have my own goals in basketball and in media that I would like to happen someday, but major setback right before the season has made that look less like a reality. So we'll see. I do really enjoy doing this. I'm very lucky I get to do this every day, which is possible because of you guys. And I like it so much that I'm pre-recording 4 episodes in one day before I go on my own honeymoon. I'm currently in Hawaii as this comes out, so I hope everybody's doing well. And I'll be back soon with more Locked On Pacers. That is the end of today's mailbag and the end of the questions that I have to answer. I don't know what day this is coming out or what's coming out tomorrow. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed this one. Talking more Pacers very soon if this is the day of Thursday. Hope you enjoy Pacers Grizzlies. Catch you in the next one, maybe tomorrow, maybe on Monday. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.